Welcome to the EchoCast. I'm Bon, and this is a podcast talking about all of the news, reviews, and speculation around video games on all platforms and almost every genre. This week, we will be talking about Square Enix cutting fat, The Division 2 new content coming real soon. Summer Games Fest has been announced, and Ubisoft is probably still selling. We'll see, and more. A few things before we jump into the show. If you're listening, please subscribe to and rate the podcast on whatever provider of choice you are listening to it on. If you are on Spotify or iTunes, please give me a big old 5-star review or whatever you deem appropriate, but 5 stars would be great. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like this video with the thumbs up, hit the bell icon to be notified of future podcasts and other videos that I make. But last and not least, join the Discord to chat about this podcast, ask questions, get new gaming news, and see my rants and probably sometimes NDA information that I forgot I'm not supposed to talk about. The link for the Discord is down in the description below. Gaming news, let's get into it. So we found out this week that Square Enix is selling off their studios and IP. So we found out that Square Enix sold Crystal Dynamic, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal to the Embracer Group, along with the related IP. This includes Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Legacy of Kain, and a bunch of other titles as well. The assumption here, this was only for $300 million. So we recently saw a much larger deal for Bungie going to Sony and retaining their third-party status, essentially being able to put their games out on other platforms. I mean, I guess Destiny is a bigger property than those ones, but 300 mil seems like a big, seems like quite the good deal. So, especially just for Tomb Raider, honestly, and a bunch of these solid studios who can make good games. Now, the assumption here is that there's been rumors for a while that Square Enix is going to go to Sony and become one of the PlayStation studios. The main reason behind that being Final Fantasy. Square Enix already works very closely with Sony, to the point that, you know, there's a Final Fantasy remake that's in progress right now. It's not technically a PlayStation exclusive, but it's not on the Xbox yet, and it's been out for a while, and there's no indication to when that's going to change. So a lot of thought is that Square Enix has always been weird. They mostly sold off their Western studios, which they've always been like really historically hard on, even though like Tomb Raider sold, I think they said almost 40 million copies between the 3 games, which is pretty damn good. Even though like Guardians of the Galaxy has done really well, especially after hitting Game Pass. The earnings reports by Square Enix pretty much always kind of dogged on their Western studios. And the idea is that they're probably cutting these studios, 1, because they feel like they aren't getting what they need out of them, and then 2, because they are probably wanting to slim down to be a more attractive acquisition target by Sony. So a lot of people are expecting either this year or next that Sony's probably going to buy them. And right now with inflation, that's only going to get more expensive, and rates are only going up to borrow money. And so the sooner that deals happen, the better. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if this summer, probably, we see Square Enix get nabbed up by Sony, but we'll have to wait and see. The second story here is for my Division 2 fans. We have title update 15, the big year 4 update. I hate calling it year 4 because year 3 was literally just a replay of the year 2, but whatever is what it is. So title update 15, season 9. Again, I hate that they're calling it season 9 because seasons 5 through 8 were just replay seasons. They weren't new, but whatever. We got information today that it will drop on May 12th. That's like 2 weeks earlier than I expected. I really didn't think this big Division update would come until the end of May, having they just ended the PTS a few days ago. But here we go. They are going to do a live stream on Twitch on May 9th to talk about what's going to be on this. I've seen some people being like, oh, State of the Game is back. I don't think State of the Game is back. I don't think we're getting weekly streams again, because really there's probably no need for it. State of the Game was cool. And I think a lot of Division fans, if you aren't a Division fan, State of the Game was a weekly show that the Division comm devs did for a long time and pretty damn consistently. I'm not aware of any other AAA game or game that did so many updates. Now, the other hand of that was that because they did it so often, they were normally missable. they normally weren't that interesting. But it was still cool. And I don't think that is coming back, despite me seeing some people kind of clickbaiting that. But they are going to come, probably show a trailer, I imagine, probably showing off the new countdown mode, probably introducing the season 9 manhunt, and yeah, so be on the lookout for that. I did do, before this happened, and I think there's still a couple days left on the poll, but I did a poll saying like, hey, are you excited about title update 15, this season 9? And I believe around 200 responses, a little bit less, and it was interesting. So I did, I'm excited, I'm not excited, I'm unsure. And not excited and unsure were at 49.9%, and excited was at 47%. And then I had a fourth option that was other, where people could explain, and that was like 2.1% or whatever, or 3.1. And yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think Countdown is fine, but I think it's not what people needed. I suspect this manhunt will be great. I worry that it's just going to be like all the other manhunts. Now, there have been some leaks about the next few seasons, and where the way the manhunts worked last time, you just did a bunch of side activities and killed off some like lieutenants, but you only got one a week. I think it was once a week, and then after the fourth week or whatever, you could kill the manhunt target. And supposedly before, the manhunt target would have their own version of an existing mission, but the lieutenants were just like a bounty hunt. It was a bounty, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. Supposedly, according to this leak, each of the lieutenants, like the lower level before the big manhunt, will also be a mission, some customized version of a mission. I would be surprised if that's what they do, but that would be better. I still just, I don't know. From the leaks, it seems like the story that's coming is cool. I just fear, maybe not fear, I'm just worried basically what's happening with season 9, and I presume a season 10, season 11, season 12, whatever it's going to be in year 4, is just going to be where I just jump on, I play for a couple hours a week to do my manhunt stuff, and then I do the final thing. I do the whole track to earn all of the rewards, and then I sit until the next manhunt. Presumably there's more content coming in the further seasons. There was some indication that they might be like trying to do a big revamp of the summit, which is this big, basically you go up 100 floors in a skyscraper to a boss. There was some indication that they might be trying to revamp that. We'll see. I hope that's true. But stuff like that, I just I've said it before and I'll say it again, that after this amount of time since the last big content update, this really needed to be like a big DLC, and instead it's just kind of like a small title update. Now, not small, I mean, obviously this countdown mode, is content. It's there, and there's other stuff happening too. There's new gear, there's new weapons, there's a bunch of changes to the game in general. It's still, I don't think it's the blockbuster update everyone was expecting. Instead, it's just a thing, and that's fine. We take what we can get. The third story here is Summer Games Fest 2022 has been announced for June 9th. If you're keeping track, that's 3 days before the Xbox show. So that's going to be a fairly short window of probably a ton of game announcements and updates and teases and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. I do plan on co-streaming that as well as the Xbox show. Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton to say. So this is the one that Jeff Keighley does. One of the notable things that he's doing with this is there's going to be IMAX theaters around the country showing this live. And hearing that and then finding out from Jeff Grubb, who's a very notable games journalist, that Jeff Keighley's dad invented the IMAX. And so there must be some personal connections there. So that's cool, I guess. If you want to go to an IMAX to watch the Game Awards, that you can. So I guess that might be kind of cool to do it with other people or whatever. I'll be streaming it and we can watch it there. It being before the Xbox show is interesting. That's interesting because I could see Sony try to take advantage of that by giving Jeff, who they have a pretty close relationship with, some kind of big thing to announce to try to take the wind out of Xbox's sails a bit, as like a preemptive strike. You could see Xbox tease some stuff that we'll see in their show a few days later as well, because there's kind of that tit for tat that's probably going to be happening for years and has been and probably always will. And then I think we'll see other stuff as well. I suspect we'll see something from Dragon Age 4 on the BioWare front. From Ubisoft, they haven't announced a forward, which I was expecting like last month or the month before in March almost. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they drop something, maybe a preview of Splinter Cell or maybe something. Surely they have to start talking about the Avatar game. That's supposed to come out this year. And that's been a project going on for a long time. So I suspect we'll see something from that if we don't see a Ubisoft forward announced. I don't see anything big from Xbox. Like I said, I think they maybe tease some stuff that's going to come a few days later in their own show. Sony, I could see show something. Nintendo, I mean, probably. Hopefully we don't see Vin Diesel on this one. I think it was last year that he previewed the Need for the Fast and the Furious game. It was either the winter or the summer show last year, and it was just abysmally bad. God, that might have been 2 years ago. Time is a concept. So this is exciting. This is essentially E3, since E3 is not happening. So if you were wondering if there's going to be some big organized week still, at least so far, having Games Fest for Jeff Keighley and then Xbox, it wouldn't surprise me if some other brands try to place themselves not too close, but in that general vicinity. Maybe Ubisoft has been sitting on a forward. Maybe Nintendo has been sitting on a Connect. I think that's what they call theirs. We'll see. So exciting stuff. Game news, always a good thing. We had some more updates and kind of clarifications on the story of Ubisoft potentially selling to a private equity firm. Basically, it's just reinforcing that Ubisoft doesn't really want to be acquired. It sounds like there was some red flags got thrown when Activision got acquired by Xbox, supposedly, which is weird because I believe the story is that Activision approached Xbox, and so I don't really. It seems like it would be weird that Ubisoft would see that deal and be like, "Oh no, we're gonna get acquired," because they would. If the only reason that should worry them is if they were planning on approaching someone. So one thing that was noted that I didn't know is that Yves Guillemot, the founder in the Guillemot family, used to have a bunch of people. I think I said this last week. I thought that there was a bunch of people from that family still involved. It's a family business, quote unquote. He's the only one left. I guess he had 2 sons that were involved in it, and they left, I think, last year. And so now he's literally the only person left from his family still involved in the company. So what's interesting and what some journalists have noted is that if they are reaching out to venture capital funding or to get acquired by like a private equity firm, then that probably means they're up for anything, because there's kind of a general like head scratching going on around the industry where like these private equity firms are known for like buying up companies, stripping them down to nothing, cutting employees and firing people and shutting, facilities down to try to make these entities that they acquire as profitable as possible. And from how bloated and inefficient and bureaucratic that I've heard that Ubisoft is, it seems really weird to me that, especially if Yves plans on staying around, that they would want to dive into that when it seems like an Embracer Group and Xbox, a Sony, an EA. Apparently there was talks that happened, rumored, that Ubisoft maybe approached EA to combining themselves to try to partner up, which would be really interesting. So I expect Ubisoft to some big splash to happen eventually. I really can't imagine a private equity firm thing would be a good thing. From the things I've seen and read about that more recently, it really seems like they'd be better off with one of the other options. God, even Tencent or something. I mean, actually, Tencent's already invested in them, but Tencent doesn't like, especially Western companies, doesn't like to like buy up all of, to own any of these. They want like bits and pieces of all of the Western companies for revenue, essentially. So I don't know. It's so funny because they fought off of Vivendi a few years ago, and for a lot of people that was like a great victory in the world of games. Only for a few years later us to see people celebrating these other acquisitions. Now, Vivendi was hostile. It was a hostile takeover. They were basically trying to buy out Ubisoft, and they did not want to be bought out. So there was kind of a different situation there a little bit, where it seems like the Bethesdas, it seems like the ZeniMaxes, the Activisions, the Blizzards, the Bungies, they were all like wanting to be acquired, or at least, being like going along with it because it was for the best of their company. So I don't know, Ubisoft is weird, man. You can't, if you look at the choices they've been making for the last like 2 or 3 years, especially, where if you look at the games that have come out and how kind of like uninspired a lot of them have been, you have to realize that those were all games that were approved to be made 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so you're talking about a pretty long time of them just making weird decisions. Like, it doesn't seem like they're trying to make any games of the year. It seems like they're basically just trying to make a bunch of like really okay games, a bunch of 6.5s out of 10. and it just doesn't. And I'm sure the individual teams and devs and you know leaders and stuff in these studios are trying to make the best game they can, but it just seems like Ubisoft isn't really going for that. And that obviously hampers the devs and the studios and stuff. So I don't know, we'll see who Ubisoft answers to a year from now. It might be interesting. The next story is another interesting one. Oh, there is one more note about Ubisoft. The Prince of Persia remake that got kind of like dogged on when it got shown a year or two ago, maybe it was last summer, I think, because it looked terrible, was being developed by Ubisoft Mumbai. I don't know anything about them. I assume this is the only thing they've ever done. I think they're a support studio who they basically assigned a full game remake, which maybe wasn't the best idea. Prince of Persia is now being worked on by Ubisoft Montreal, who does Assassin's Creed. That seems like a pretty natural, switch. Doesn't surprise me at all. I'm wondering, especially if Ubisoft's looking to be purchased, Ubisoft has like 30 studios, and a bunch of them are just support studios. Some are bigger, some are small. I believe there's like Ubisoft Shanghai, Mumbai. I want to say they have one in Singapore. That was the one that was doing Skull and Bones. Here's a little Skull and Bones tidbit. Ubisoft received a huge grant to help pay for the development of Skull and Bones from Singapore. I believe it was Singapore. So they have to release that game or pay back the grant. And so there's a lot of theories that there's a chance they may just poop Skull and Bones out as good as they can make it and then just bust on to the next thing, because they pretty much have to release it or else it's going to cost them money. So they can at least hope to get break even on it, after all this time. So I'm curious too if they do get bought up or something like that, if we see them consolidate their studios like significantly, because they have a bunch of these well-known studios: Red Storm Montreal, Ubisoft Paris, Massive, Reflections, and those Leamington and stuff like that in England. But then they have like a bunch of these like other studios you've probably never heard of, and it seems like they're just a very bloated company. And if you ever get to talk to an Ubisoft employee, especially a developer, you will hear stories about how they'll brag about like, we have this many thousand people and this many studios working on our game. And that sounds cool on paper, but then you hear these stories from people who are part of that being like, yeah, we don't know what that studio is doing. This studio was assigned this thing because this was a thing that happened with Division 2. The year one, like DLCs or whatever they were called, episodes, the Kinley College, the Pentagon, those things were supposed to be massively different in scope, but they were done by outside studios. And the raids, including the raids, and they were not as what they were supposed to be, and they basically had to cut those down to almost nothing, even though they were supposed to be these big, giant, impressive game modes. So Ubisoft, you never want to see people lose their jobs, you never want to see that kind of stuff happen, but they are probably a little too big for their own good, and I think it shows often. So a whole nother weird story has been The Day Before. So this is a game that a year or two ago put out this trailer that it basically was reminding people of like The Last of Us and The Division, and some of the gameplay stuff looked more like Last of Us. Their trailers and a lot of their aesthetics seemed like they were almost ripped completely out of The Division and plastered on there. It's a zombie game, which is the kind of the more The Last of Us reference as well. But it was, it looked really interesting and really impressive. And then you started to learn more. And so it's being made by the studio called Fantastic, with no A, FN, who was at the time based in Russia. Supposedly, from what I've read, they moved to Singapore, I think, as well. Probably, I bet, I'm willing to bet there's a grant involved there. But then everyone's working remotely. So my guess is, if you're aware of the game Escape from Tarkov, BSG, Battlestate Games, is technically a London-based studio, but they have one employee in London, that is required to be able to have a business there. And then all of their employees work quote unquote remotely from Russia, which I'm sure is complicated now. So my guess is that this fantastic studio is quote unquote based in Singapore and everyone's working remotely, which means they're probably all still working at a studio in Russia. But they're, they're gaming something off of Singapore. And so this game got shown, and I had kind of weird. I'm very suspicious of basically any Steam early access survival game. I was there for day one of the Daisy standalone, God, like 9 or 10 years ago now, and that game's a shit show. It still like is in development and still looks like it's from 10 years ago. It's like they've never taken a minute to stop and update this game to look like it was made after, God, 2016 or 17. It just looked so awful. And so, and I've seen, like, I know people who are really into these survival games, and you just see this pattern over and over and over and over again, where these like small studios with like 15 or 20 people, or even less, with like not very much funding and not a lot of experience, come up with this insanely cool survival game idea with this thing, and you drop in and you build this, and you have to eat that, and you have to kill these things, and then you have to go do this thing, and then they'll put out like an alpha and it's just terrible. And then they'll take it down and be like, okay guys, we know that wasn't what you wanted, so we're gonna go quiet. And then they'll come back like 6 months later with a beta, and it'll still kind of suck. And then they just kind of like flounder in this beta process for years. And I've just described like probably 600 games on Steam, right? And this day before game, the difference with them, or maybe not, is that they put out some really polished, interesting looking trailers, and did a bunch of this like viral marketing, and they were really playing to the Division community. Like you could tell by the way that they were making their trailers, by the screenshots they were showing, and they were really modeling a lot of of what they were showing after the Division and Last of Us and stuff like that. But what's happened is they keep doing this thing where on their social media they'll be like, oh man, something big's coming, big news, playable demo coming, and soon, or this or that. And then they just always delay. There's always they're we're gonna do a live announcement, and then the live announcement time passes, and then like 2 days later they'll be like, sorry, we have to delay. And so what was supposed to happen was this week, it was about 6 weeks away from its release date, even though we've seen no actual gameplay. And yes, I know they've shown some trailers. That's not gameplay. We have not seen a single frame of that game where there was someone just dropping into the world and playing the game. Not one. We have not seen one frame of that. We've seen a bunch of organized and scripted trailers. And even the last trailer, I think they put out around like Christmas or something. I think it was supposed to be another like sizzle reel, but there were multiple moments in that game. Like it showed there was, you were in a mall, like a shopping mall in New York or something, which it was very reminiscent to a similar thing in the Division 1. And there were a few moments in that trailer where you could see that this area they were playing in was like empty. There was no like detail on the ground or on the walls, and it was just this like really crappy, and the control, like it just looked really janky. So they make like these really good trailers if you don't look too closely. And then what just happened this week was they were supposed to release the game in 6 weeks again, even though we've not actually seen anyone play it. Like they haven't like jumped onto a live stream to show a beta, like to show like beta footage, or to show them in the world playing the game. It hasn't happened. Their communication's been terrible, and I think there's a good reason for it. And they announced this week, well, first they teased that we have big news coming this week. And that obviously, like, you don't tease bad news, right? Why would you? That's stupid. And so people were like, oh, they're going to finally show us some like hands-on gameplay. Maybe there's going to be a demo, like, or, the people had all these ideas. And then they announced that they're delaying the game until the beginning of 2023, so they can upgrade. It's on Unreal Engine 4, the current game, so they can upgrade it to Unreal Engine 5. Be BS. That is BS. There's no way, because one, that's probably not enough time, because there's supposedly been some commentary about them like, well, we want to take advantage of all these things that Unreal 5 can do. And I've seen some commentary from developers being like this game probably wouldn't have been ready on Unreal Engine 4 by next year, let alone now dropping it into a whole new engine, even though it is probably pretty compatible. Just transferring it to that engine would probably take until the middle of next year, let alone now adding all of the new things that Unreal 5 does over 4. So like the nanite stuff and metahuman and all that probably. So that's, you're talking like a whole nother year for that. So the game shouldn't be coming until 2024, right? So I got some flack for calling this game a scam because they haven't taken any money, technically, right? Fine. It's scummy. If it's not a scam, then it's scummy, because they're and I think, you can look at it two ways. A lot of these indie devs, the ones I was just dogging on, I think a lot of them mean well. I think a lot of them just have ambitions that are way bigger than their budget or their talent or their time, right? And that's fine, because you see some of these indie teams come out like Valheim and Fall Guys and stuff like that. Like, you see these games come out from these like unknown or small studios, but when you look at those games, it's because they kept their scope within their reach. Where a game like this, like the day before this game, doesn't look like a game I would trust any AAA studio to put out, at least not as quickly as they are acting like they're going to do this. If Ubisoft announced the day before and they showed all this stuff and promised all the stuff this game has promised, there was a trailer they showed where like you had to like break into a house to get supplies, but the house had alarms and you have to undo the alarms or turn off the electricity. But if you do that, some local militia gets alerted and they come and see what's going on, and then you escape from them and go into this bunker complex. And it's just like, it's all just overpromise and maybe never deliver. And so yeah, like obviously I have faith that there's indie teams who can make really, really good games. We've seen so many examples of that over the last few years, but every one of those teams who basically proposes like a quadruple A game just fails miserably. I can't think of a single example of one of these really small studios who just made these like wild claims for their upcoming game and like even released a game, a bad one or a good one. This is something like Cyberpunk almost. Like, CDPR is this giant studio. I'm pretty sure a tile just fell right here. I don't know if you'll see that if you rewind it. I don't know. There's a bunch of Division creators who I'm, unfortunately still, in the circle of, who have been riding this game hard ever since it got announced. And a few of them are seem like they're kind of smelling what's coming. But some of them aren't, man. I've seen multiple people still being like, oh man, I can't wait for this game. It's like, guys, come on. Like, it's so funny. And my favorite one is that there's some people who hate the Division because it let them down. It wasn't the game they wanted, blah, 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 blah. Who buy into this game, who I've seen buy into Tarkov and stuff, where all these games, Tarkov is a fine game, but it's under delivered 10 times more than the Division ever has. But whatever, it's just this the day before, I don't think this game will ever release. And when it does, if it does, I think it's gonna be a complete shit show, and they're gonna be like, yeah, but we're gonna add that stuff later, and then 6 years from now, it's like Star Citizen without all the funding. I just, because this developer has literally made a couple mobile games, and then a few months ago they were like, we're delaying the day before so we can put out this prop hunt game using this so that we can raise money for the day before. They've just had a bunch of it's just a weird vibe with this game. But I don't know. Maybe the day before comes out and it ends up being the highest ranked game ever made. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. The second to last story here is the Halo Infinite Season 2 reception has not been great, unfortunately. They added a couple maps. Some people are kind of miffed about that like, you know, they just did a 6-month Season 1 and then Season 2 comes out and they add like 2 maps and a couple modes. It seems pretty underwhelming. I know I'm not really interested in jumping back in. I liked Halo Infinite. I loved the single player. I thought the story was great. I liked the multiplayer, but I just got bored kind of quick, and I've seen nothing yet that's like really pulled me back in. So I'll wait until something does. And the Halo Infinite, if you don't know, is supposed to be on a 10-year development cycle, like from release. Like they were planning on updating this game for 10 years. We'll see. I think after you acquire Activision Blizzard, it's real hard to not maybe give one of the Call of Duty studios a shot at like a Halo. Even if you do like a spinoff or something, I think you maybe try to inject some new blood into Halo, because this idea of making 343 the new Halo studio after Bungie took off, I just don't think it seems like it's going very well. We had 4, we had 5, and now Infinite. I think Infinite's infinitely better, pardon the the joke, than 4 or 5 in a lot of ways. But I think there's a chance that Halo is just, come and gone in a way. And I don't think that Halo has to be the headline franchise for Xbox to still exist. I think Halo will continue to be around in some capacity, but I think we may be entering a stage where Halo isn't the blockbuster Xbox franchise anymore, and it's just a good game they have. And I think that's okay, and I think that might be good for Xbox in the long run. The last bit here is a couple first impressions. I have played an hour or 2 of these games. So Loot River is a game that's on Game Pass right now. It's really interesting. It's a roguelike, and its kind of twist or spin or whatever is that you, with the left stick and your triggers and buttons, you control the fighting and movement and stuff like that. Pretty standard. With the right stick, you control the platforms you're standing on. And so it's almost like Tetris and like Dead Cell, like mixed together, or there's a bunch of other games. It's really interesting. I tried to play it. I'm probably just too stupid for a game like that, to be totally honest. I really appreciate the unique spin they're putting on it, but it's probably not for me. So, we'll see. So Loot River, definitely check it out. It may be your jam. It was very interesting. It was a really cool take on a pretty explored genre at this point. So I would definitely check that out. The other one was one I was really excited for. It was Trek to Yomi. And I think Trek to Yomi kind of suffered from the attention it got, because on trailers and stuff, it looked really cool. Like it had such a cool vibe. The art style was beautiful. A lot of the presentation is just top notch. And then you put your hands on it, and it's okay. It doesn't feel very good to play, in my opinion. The combat, it just looks like it should be good, and it's just, it's not very good. I really don't enjoy playing Trek to Yomi, even though I like looking at it. So it's one of those weird things. So that's one I'm gonna pass on. It's also on Game Pass, so if you have that, I think it's worth a shot. It may speak to you. You may enjoy it more than I did, but yeah, I don't know. It was definitely kind of a bummer. I had high expectations for Trek to Yomi. So we're going to jump into the listener questions. If you have any listener questions, you can ask on my Twitter, in the Discord, on my YouTube comments. You can email me if you want. I don't know. There's all kinds of places to ask questions. Please do. I would very much love to get your thoughts and your stories or your questions to talk about. The first question this week is from Master Prime on Discord. is Starfield going to suffer from the Bethesda distrust that most people have? So I wouldn't say most, I would say a lot, but maybe not most. Like, I know, like, I'm definitely like kind of side eyeing Bethesda a little bit with Starfield, but it's like, for me, after reading stories about like Fallout 76 and learning about why that game is the way it is, you kind of start to be like, they tried to do a thing and they didn't really probably put enough effort in it, and there probably weren't the right people on it. And then they did kind of fix it up, and the game does have its fans, even though it was pretty unanimously lauded for being bad. And so, like, 76 doesn't throw me off. And so then you go back to Fallout 4. I really like Fallout 4. It wasn't like a giant step up from like New Vegas and Fallout 3, but I think it did improve a lot, and I really enjoyed it, and I think it looked pretty good. And so if that is the last example of a Bethesda game you look at, and then you think about the Starfield game has been in development ever since 4 came out, that it's on this supposedly big upgraded part of their engine, which it probably is. I have some faith in that, more than 76 for sure. I think yes. I think, because what you keep seeing is, like Elden Ring is, for most people, their game of the year. And then there's a few other games that are kind of up there too. And every time you hear these conversations from like game journalists, they'll be like, what games could take down Elden Ring? And they talk about like God of War Ragnarok. If that comes out this year, I don't think it will, but that's just they also haven't basically talked much about it. As well as a couple other games, Call of Duty and things like that. And every time they bring up Starfield as being a potential game of the year, they're like, it could be, but it's Bethesda, womp womp, And I just really think that like that's really ignoring what they did with Fallout 4 and New Vegas. Well, they didn't do that. Was Oblivion? No. Oh, I can't remember that studio's name now. But Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Skyrim, which is still coming out in redone versions, even this year. So I think Bethesda, I think people are sleeping on it. That may be good for Starfield. Maybe expectations are low and people are going to be blown away if it's really good. But I think Starfield starts on its back foot because of Bethesda's issues in recent years. But I think that may also be an opportunity for it to jump up. So we'll see. Good question. M88 hit me with a whole litany of questions. I took about half of them to actually answer, either because I've already answered them or because they weren't really things I could answer. So here's the questions that M88 gave me on Twitter. If a studio, if there's a studio that would make the Division-like game, what would you bet on? Well, so we know Shark Mob is making a game, and has been for a long time working on a game. They're the dev who just released Blood Hunt, the zombie battle royale, and that this Blood Hunt game is a contract job for the Vampire Masquerade franchise. And the reason Shark Mob is doing it is to raise funds to make their own AAA game that they've been working on for a long time. And the thing to know about Shark Mob is that Shark Mob was founded by a bunch of disgruntled Massive employees who left Massive right before Division 1 came out. And I think, there's probably lots of speculation to make their own studio and start their own game, which, if you look at concept art that they've made for this game that I think is untitled, it's very Division-y, to the point where I believe there was a lawsuit filed by Ubisoft or Massive against Shark Mob that I think ended up getting dismissed or settled about this. So Shark Mob, I think, is going to be a one to watch out for. Apparently Shark Mob in more recent years has hired a bunch of DICE and EA employees. Like, it sounds like a studio full of AAA devs. And so that would be one to keep an eye on, I think. It is weird to me that not even one other big, like an EA or Sony or Xbox, has tried to make like a very Division-y game. Because even the other looters that have come out after the Division haven't tried to do like the modern day realistic aesthetic. like Outriders and Anthem, if you count that. Um, they all kind of tried to do their own thing. Or you're looking at like really fantastical ones like Borderlands and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think Shark Mob's the best answer. I think they're the ones who, I think whatever game they put out is going to be maybe something closer to some of the original vision of the Division 1 that I've heard that got corrupted or changed because Ubisoft wanted their own Destiny. But, maybe that's just a rumor. We'll see. Second question, do the Division games need a major overhaul? Yeah, I've been saying that for a while now. I think that if/when we get a Division 3, I very easily think it could be a rebooted franchise. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think people need to realize that Division 1 and 2 were supposed to compete with Destiny 1 and 2, and they didn't. They did well. The games both sold over 10 million copies. I believe Division 2 has done like really well in the meta view. But neither one of them accomplished their goal, and it's because Destiny is literally made by a studio that is 100% dedicated to it, and for parts of their time have been their own publisher. So they made their own decisions, where Massive has always had multiple projects on their queue. And Ubisoft has never let them fully invest into the Division. And so I hope some prevailing wind can convince Ubisoft to let Massive just make the Division a cool game, however they see fit. Trying to do this live service, looter shooter, RPG with PvP and PvE, it hasn't worked. And they've tried. They've put tons of effort. They've made 2 good games, but neither one of those games feel like they've met their potential. And I think it's because they're being drugged down by their genre, by some of their features, and some of the stuff that I think if you gave the Massive developers a choice to do things or not, they wouldn't do them. And they would make an even better game and franchise. So yes, I think it needs a major overhaul. Let's see. What are your current PC specs? My current PC specs are a B450 Aorus Pro motherboard. It's a bit old. A 3060 Ti graphics card that I just recently got. A 3070X AMD Ryzen 7 processor. 32 gigs of 3600 megahertz. What brand is that? Corsair, I believe Corsair Vengeance RAM. And a big old fat boy Be Quiet, like the big giant 2 giant radiator air cooler. And it's in a NZXT case, the 510 or whatever, they're pretty standard case, which is actually I'm thinking about replacing because I looked up some information about it, and it has awful airflow. Now I don't overclock and do a bunch of crazy stuff. All my temps are fine. I've never had issues whether I'm playing games or rendering or streaming or whatever. It's probably fine. And then I have a 750 megahertz EVGA gold rated power supply. And then peripherals, I have a Elgato Mark II 4K 60 FPS capture card. So yeah, so that's my setup. It's pretty dope. And I have these super nice Bayer Dynamic DT990 Pro headphones. This is a Elgato Wave 3 mic with the little cover and nice little arm here. And then this mic arm is actually like a $40 arm that I think is better than anything you can pay like $200 for from other people. My screens are 2 Samsung 4K 60 FPS screens, or 60 hertz screens. I have a Logitech StreamCam up here as my camera. It's really cool. I have a reading lamp like on an arm for my lighting over here. I have a straight up just lamp over here. It's exactly the same as this one, except it's behind me. I have a a Logitech mouse and keyboard. It's a 502 Hero. I can't remember what my keyboard is. Xbox Series X down below. I have a Creative Sound Blaster X amp powering these babies. And I have some really nice Logitech 2.1 speakers that I use when I'm not using headphones, that has a big old fat sub. I think it's like an 8 or 10 inch sub down there, and a THX certified system here. It's super nice. Whenever the wife and daughter are out, I love blasting this thing. And I think that's my setup. So there it is. There's the whole tour. Does survival have a chance to drop in Division 2? Nope. Easy answer. I will say that Heartland was probably supposed to be survival, and then they decided to make it a standalone game. I am very willing to bet that that was the case. So thank you for the questions, M88. Chicago Rocks, Chicago Rocks on Twitter. Will the PSVR 2 have a theater app with a large screen option for me to watch my 3D Blu-rays on? So I don't know a ton about PSVR, and I don't know if we've gotten much information on PSVR 2 besides some of the features of the headset, which really do seem great. And it sounds like it's going to be able to be a pretty high fidelity machine. The new style controllers, which again look legitimately pretty cool. You would think that would be a pretty dope option though, right? To be able to watch like 3D Blu-rays on through your system on this PSVR thing. So I have no idea, but I certainly hope so. Again, if you have any of your own questions, please feel free to ask in all the places where I post stuff. For content updates for myself, I put out your ideal Mass Effect 4 video on YouTube, so please go and watch that, like it, share it, subscribe, all that stuff. It was a fun video where I posted on the Mass Effect subreddit of like, here's a bunch of categories, fill out your ideal Mass Effect 4, the next game. So like time frame, characters, bad guys, blah 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 blah. And I did my own, and then like 20 plus people responded and gave their ideal, and I hated most of them. And I did a video where I went through each one, read them, gave my take on it, and then it was cool. It's a fun little video, and I suggest you go check it out. I have, speaking of Mass Effect, been approved as a BioWare Gear ambassador. So as of right now, for the next week or so, if you go to the BioWare merch website and use code BWBD, you get 20% off. If stuff is like pre-ordered or already discounted, it doesn't do it, but everything else, it takes 20% off. 10 people can use that code, and it lasts about a week. When it expires, I will make a new code and try to update at least my last couple bits of content with the new code for 20%. So if you don't buy something now, but you do next month, use my code and you will get a big fat discount off of it. I do get a kickback as well, to be very clear. And speaking of BioWare, there was a job that came up on their job board. I have a running list of jobs. I did this with Division as well because I'm a weirdo stalker. I'm keeping a running list of job positions for the next Mass Effect that pop up, and ones that disappear, that get filled, presumably. And when I was doing this recently, I noticed a new job popped up, and I looked at the details, and it specifically asked for someone with my degree. It specifically asked for someone with my experience, even though I'm in a field that has very little to do with gaming, or at least so I thought, and doesn't require like being involved with gaming already. Sounds like it's pretty open to taking people who are new to the field. And so I applied. It would be an interesting opportunity. I suspect it's a work from home job. I suspect it would involve travel to Canada and Texas fairly often though, but that would be cool. I wouldn't hate that. That would be a nice change. And so I did that. I don't expect to even get a call back, but it would be cool, and you have to shoot your shot, so I did. And one last note, and I doubt anyone's going to get this far, especially the audience I'm speaking to. But it seems my partner in her job, some of her clients, I will call them, have discovered me. And for years, the people that she interacts with have known that she let it slip years ago that I do this stuff, this podcast, and I occasionally stream and so on and so forth. And it appears that they have discovered who I am. So I'm really boring, especially if you made it this far. You know that there's not really anything interesting here. I don't talk about her that much, so you know, you're not going to get that here. And the last thing I'm gonna say is you need to get your homework done, because I know that you haven't done it, and she's not gonna give you any help. She's not gonna give you a break. So there we go. Let's wrap this baby up. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast. If you want more, be sure to like this video. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel on whatever platform you're listening to it on. Be notified of new videos by hitting the bell on YouTube, and maybe check out some of my other content. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including on Twitter, YouTube, and on Twitch. Please check out the EchoCast and Bond Diesel merch at the link in the description below on my Streamlabs merch store. And that's all I have. So until next time.